you know that Tenere means desert in the language of the Tuareg people in Saharan Africa? In this video, we are going to be discussing the history of the Yamaha Tenere.
Yamaha Super Tenere machines have proved invincible in the two major classics of off-road marathon racing.
To understand the history of the Yamaha Tenere, you have to understand the Yamaha XT500. This is the bike that really started it all. It was an off-road dual sport machine at the time. But Yamaha also had a version of this that was an on-road version. The XT500 was extremely popular in France and Italy, and the Tenere line has always been more popular in France. An XT500 rider won the Paris Dakar back in 1979, and in 1979 in the same race it also came in second.
In 1979 it was the adventure that mattered most, and there was just one overall classification. Cyril Neveu led the overall standings, ahead of Fenouillet and Hubert Auriol, three men that would create much of the rally's history for more than 20 years.
But with a single-cylinder engine, the race in Paris Dakar crossing vast deserts required more top-end speed. So the XT500 had to evolve. It evolved into a 4-valve XT500, and later it got bumped up in displacement into 600. When the XT500 needed more top-end speed, Yamaha made a 600cc version. That is the beginning of the Tenere name. With the displacement increase, it also got a bump up in the gas tank range because it needed to cross deserts. This Tenere name in the 1980s grew to represent Yamaha's adventurous spirit. The Tenere was the brainchild of Jean-Claude Olivier. At the time, he was an employee of the French Yamaha motor product importer Sornato. Olivier helped pioneer what came to be called as an adventure category in motorcycling. He said, "The time has come for the motorcycle to be a vehicle for adventure." Of course, in North America, we never got the Yamaha Tenere. What we got was the Yamaha TT600 Enduro model. The Yamaha Tenere was first unveiled in 1982 in the Paris Motorcycle Show. Its styling and image sparked a new interest in a new segment of motorcycles, now called the adventure market. This bike was the choice for motorcycle racers in the Paris Dakar and desert racing, but also many casual motorcyclists loved this bike for its appeal and its styling and the image of adventure. The Yamaha Tenere was a huge success. Frenchmen had a special interest in this bike. In France alone, it sold 20,000 copies.
A Yamaha XT600 Tenere.
This Tenere could reach 100 miles per hour, about 160 kilometers per hour. The ability to maintain 100 miles per hour average over certain sections of the Paris Dakar made this bike really sought after. Combined with the speed, it needed to be durable and reliable to cross deserts. The XT600 Tenere was built on the predecessor of the XT500, a bike that was already known to be durable and reliable. The TT600 and the XT600Z Tenere featured Yamaha's famous monocross suspension system. This layout with its ball crank and L-links for added leverage plus a aluminum alloy single box section swing arm to reduce unsprung weight has previously only been used on the YZ motocrossers. In 1986, in the Paris Dakar rally, Yamaha started using a 4-cylinder engine from the Yamaha FZ750 sport bike. This is right at the time when they started to think of multi-cylinder bikes because the Paris Dakar was increasing in speed and miles per hour all the time. But because of its disadvantage of having much more weight, it finished in 12th place. But this is when Yamaha started to think about making a new Yamaha Tenere. For 1986, Yamaha did continue with the consumer market with the single-cylinder Yamaha 600 Tenere. That's the second generation of the Tenere. It was intended to be even closer to rally bikes. So the fuel capacity on this one went down to 21 liters from 30, but the power went up to 46 horsepower thanks to the new carbs and airbox. And it also gets a new electric starter for the first time. So this engine was slightly increased. It had electric start, 21 liters of fuel, and it also required a fuel pump because of the shape of the gas tank. Yamaha also made the Dakar Rally factory machine with specifically designed frame mounting an engine based on that of the production of the off-road model XT600. And in 1986, Frenchman Thierry Charbonnier placed fourth riding this machine.
Entre première et deuxième, la 600 Yamaha est commercialisée au prix de 27 000 francs.
In 1988, there was a new version of the Yamaha XT600Z Tenere. It was a complete redesign with frame-mounted fairing incorporating the twin headlights. Tank capacity back up to 23 liters, the engine completely reworked, and discs replaced drum brakes. The first big change, it was the frame-mounted fairing, the twin headlights, those classical twin headlights, and it even had the rear disc brakes. The engine was also modified to improve cooling and lubrication. So this bike had 23 liters of fuel, and partly due to the air filter being moved from under the seat to under the fuel tank. It also had bigger valves, and that resulted in 46 horsepower. Top speed also increased to 161 kilometers per hour or 100.4 miles per hour. This became a very popular machine, especially in France. The Frenchmen couldn't get enough of it, and in a time where motorcycles looked like cruisers and standards, this stood out. Not only was the Tenere a great off-roader, it was a great commuter, and it was also a great road bike. This bike was an almost exact replica of the factory team racers at the time. The fuel tank was redesigned so it carried gas further down, thus needing a fuel pump. At the time, there was very few bikes like the Tenere on the road. This is perhaps one of the most widely loved bikes in the Yamaha Tenere range. This is the 750 Super Tenere. Yamaha began creating this motorcycle in 1987 because of the higher speeds needed for desert racing in Dakar. They needed a machine that was fully capable of keeping 100 miles per hour in the vast open desert. Complete with twin front discs, a massive 26-liter tank, race 750, and then there was a 850 version that went to win the Paris Dakar a total of 6 times. The model was discontinued in 1996, but the XT750 is a larger twin-cylinder version of the single-cylinder Yamaha XTZ660 Tenere. The XTZ660 and the XTZ750 models superseded the smaller air-cooled Yamaha XT600Z Tenere. First sold in '89, the Super Tenere used a new Yamaha engine design containing 5 valve heads, a classic Yamaha feature now. A solid protective guard around the engine to prevent damage. From 1989, you're starting to see the connection to the newer models. The Super Tenere now is a touring adventure model with a twin cylinder. The Super Tenere of 1989 had front brake discs, and it also had front brake disc guards, something that we don't see in modern bikes anymore. For normal road use, these covers are really beneficial, but they can make cooling of the brakes much more difficult when riding downhill. The Yamaha Super Tenere XTZ750 was discontinued in 1996, but not before the Dakar version, the YZE750, won the Dakar race twice, plus 4 more times as an 850. Back in the 80s and 90s, the Yamaha XTZ750 Super Tenere was a solid, capable, much-loved dual sport in many places that weren't North America. Europe had a particular love for this slightly top-heavy, but mostly very manageable machine. The liquid-cooled 10-valve parallel twin made a claimed 69 horsepower when new, and was extremely capable off-road. It is, without a doubt, to the Paris Dakar that we owe this Yamaha XTZ750 Super Tenere. Yamaha designed this new engine and demonstrated a lot of innovation with this very compact inline twin equipped with a dry sump and a gearbox located high up. A very modern engine with 5 valves per cylinder, its double balance shaft and its Mikuni 38mm flat valve carburetor arranged to provide an almost vertical supply. This engine on the Super Tenere developed 70 horsepower. It's a significant value. Compare it to the 45 horsepower of the 600 Tenere and the 57 by the V-twin of the Africa Twin. And another Yamaha feature that's still available today in their engines, it was a very easy bike to own. It required only major engine overhauls every 42,000 kilometers. The engine block lasted a very long time without any modifications. It also benefited the 850 TRX and the 850 and the 900 TDM. It is, and rightly so, known to be extremely reliable, one of the key features and one of the major big benefits of Yamaha. So after all this time, the Yamaha Super Tenere, you're starting to see the lineage to the current Yamaha Super Tenere. Back in the day, the 750s were some of the bigger motorcycles available on the market. In 1991, Yamaha came up with the XTZ660 Tenere. It was the new 5-valve liquid-cooled version of the single cylinder, good for 48 horsepower at the heart of this complete redesign. Slimmer, less rugged, and more road biased than before, with a small 20-liter tank and a shorter stroke suspension. In 1994, the XTZ660 Tenere, it was the final version of the last generation single-cylinder Tenere. It had much more streamlined bodywork with a dual beam headlight inspired by the Super Tenere twin, but in 1998 it was removed. In 2006, the Yamaha XT660Z Tenere was the all-new single-cylinder Tenere based on the 2004 XTZ 660X. Of course, this is another bike that has never come to North America. This is definitely a very good looking bike, and with its large tank and very fuel efficient motor, it was capable of getting 500 kilometers per tank. The Aprilia Pegaso also shared the same engine with this particular Yamaha Tenere. This bike was a return to the single-cylinder XT500 form and function. Just a very simple engine, very basic bike, streamlined with Dakar rally styling. Yamaha made a great dual sport with this one, but yet it was very unpopular. In 2010, the Yamaha Super Tenere hit the scenes. This was an all-new Super Tenere, followed the same basic template as the old XTZ 750 parallel twin engine. It had twin headlights and a steel frame. The headlights didn't look like those round Africa Twin and Super Tenere headlights, but they needed to modernize it. Now it contains much more technology than an R1, and it had three-way traction control. It also had linked ABS and a cross-plane crank. With the popularity of the BMW GS, there's been a trend to develop large bikes, large touring bikes, and this Yamaha Super Tenere was in response to mostly competing in the large adventure market. The XTZ 1200Z is the largest dual sport made by Yamaha. The Super Tenere and the Tenere 700 are probably the more interesting bikes to come out from Yamaha in a very long time, mainly because they are calling back on that history of Paris Dakar to make these bikes. So when you have a little bit of lineage, it's much more interesting to have bikes, because these Teneres, even though they were not very popular in North America, they were extremely popular in Europe and the rest of the world. This Super Tenere featured a liquid-cooled 4-stroke, fuel-injected 1199 cc parallel twin engine with a 270-degree crank, which powers the motorcycle through a 6-speed gearbox and shaft drive. The shaft drive is really one of the best things for this large motorcycle. The XTZ 1200Z also features multi-mode traction control system and electronic throttle control, with programs to support off-road use, switchable engine mapping, and combined brakes with ABS. The first models were badged First Edition and came with bash plates and aluminum panniers. In short, the original Super Tenere was discontinued in 1996. It was a 750cc version and returned in 2010 in Europe as the 1200cc version we have today. It had a cross-plane crank firing technology from the Yamaha R1. It had a shaft drive, it had ABS, it had selectable engine maps, it had cruise control, it had traction control, it had electronic suspension. This was a leap forward by Yamaha. This is a direct competitor to the BMW GS. With its 270-degree crank pin offset with uneven firing intervals, emitting a tight-spaced power pulses similar to a big thumper, and a twin-gear-driven balance shaft subdue unwanted vibration. It also has throttle-by-wire. Probably one of the more significant aspects of the Yamaha Super Tenere is its durability. It is just one of the most robust bikes you can possibly get. If you want to put hundreds of thousands of miles on a bike, this is probably one of the better ones you can do it. And it's also affordable compared to the current offerings by BMW. This 700cc engine comes from the MT-07 that Yamaha introduced in 2014. Of course, these adventure bikes make great commuters, and this Yamaha With the Yamaha durability and reliability, you can take these bikes to 25,000 miles between service intervals. Not oil changes, but the valve adjustments. Something that a lot of makers never emphasize. But Yamaha still does that with their current bikes. Let's not forget the newest member of the Tenere family, the Tenere 700, which is very close in styling to the old 2006 Yamaha XT660Z Tenere. This bike has been all the rage in the United States and the rest of the world because it is a very interesting, very minimalistic, and very affordable bike. In a sea of bikes that cost $20,000, it is very rare to get a bike that's a dual sport, a cross-continent devouring machine like the Tenere 700 and be able to ride off-road for about $11,000 US. The beauty of this bike is that it's just simple. It's a simple bike. It doesn't have any amazing technology. It's a torquey parallel twin engine. Essentially, this bike has a lot more in common with the Yamaha 750 Super Tenere, but nowadays 700 is a small bike. It's cheaper than the rest of the competition, very affordable, and it's a bike that the world needed. We needed a bike that was simple. Bikes are just getting way too complex. Even with the Super Tenere, it's extremely complex, but when you compare it to the competition, it is not. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles that a BMW GS has or a Africa Twin. The Tenere 700 has got upside down forks, very much like the Super Tenere. It gives you 210 millimeters of travel and has a compression and rebound damping. And at the rear there is a Sachs shock with 200 millimeters of travel. This bike has 72 horsepower, which is amazing when you compare it to 1996 when the Yamaha Super Tenere had 70 horsepower in a 750cc twin cylinder. After riding the Tenere 700, you quickly realize that you don't need a 1200cc engine for having any type of high-speed fun. This 700cc engine is completely capable of keeping up with all sorts of bikes in the twisties, and the best thing, of course, is got a 21-inch front wheel, so very capable off-road. It doesn't have any vibration through the handlebars, and you can lug this bike down to 2500 RPMs and it'll still completely pull throughout. The Tenere 700 is truly a bike that makes its predecessor, the Yamaha Tenere, proud. But this is not just a Tenere. The Tenere 700 should have been called the Super Tenere because it indeed is very much the old spirit of the Tenere. It has that Dakar feel when you ride it, and when you compare it to the old Tenere, it really brings back memories. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really appreciate it. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.